We're now into the Alexander part, and mainly up in Lexington, Illinois, and so I just want to introduce Marilyn Beard, who is the mother of Shelley and Jay, anyway, Marilyn came to us about what 5-6 years after we started.
1974.
1974.
September
So
1974.
yeah, so 5 years later, and was with us for 31 years, and brought her daughter Shelley along when she was what 18,
18, 19, something
18
like that.
or 19 years
Just-
old.
Shelley
is now our beloved plant manager, and has done an absolute wonderful job. She's been with us for 40 years. So how lucky can a company be to have these wonderful people as part of it? But we have a whole plant full of these people, and some 40 people, and they're all from the area, and we are blessed to have each of them, and thankful, and some with very long ties with the company as well. I just before they say a few words or talk and get in and get me out of the picture for a minute, when I bought Alexander, I didn't realize two things. One, that they had a fountain pen, and that's a pen that has a point on it. I mean, people today don't know what a fountain pen is, but it has a gold. This one has a gold point. It has Alexander on it, and then it's a lever filler, so it fills by pulling this down. You put it in the ink, and then you let it back up, and it sucks the ink up into the pen. Well, this pen we stopped making when I bought the company, but it was back from the 1950s and 1960s, and I didn't talk about how the company Alexander started, but I could mention something about that.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that Frank Alexander and Bob Sherman had copied the screwdriver that we made. And until I start looking at the catalog and the inventory, I finally said, oh my God, they make a screwdriver. Well, here I found a picture, an old picture from back in the 1960s, early 60s, of this screwdriver that they had copied from my father, and were making up here, and not selling a lot of them, but they still made them. Well, interestingly enough, Lipic Pen Company, their biggest product line was screwdrivers, and when I saw this inventory, there were clips and there were barrels and there were blades, and I took them down to my old company and asked my uncle if he would buy them, because I didn't want to be in competition for me, and if he would buy the inventory. And the whole inventory was like maybe $700, $600, and I needed money. And he told me, he said, absolutely not, and he wouldn't buy them from me. So I turned around and came back, and they were selling millions of screwdrivers at the time. I came back for $700. I'll just follow this. And I said, I'll just put an imprint on here and a sample and send them out to people, and I'll sell them and get rid of them. Well, it took off so quickly that I kept them in the line, and this screwdriver, and if you look at our current catalogs, it's an extensive line of screwdrivers. This screwdriver put the Joseph Lipic Pen Company out of business in 1999. They closed their doors because we had taken all their business. So it just shows you, for a couple of bucks, don't pass up an opportunity. And but this screwdriver, even though they knocked us off, was was in the line. At any rate, these wonderful people were some of the backbone of our company. And Marilyn, I just want to ask you if you'd like to tell a few stories about what went on. And
Oh, gee. Maybe better not. Well, I started in '74. I had worked at Motorola, but then Motorola closed. So then I worked part-time cleaning and stuff like that. And I was getting really tired of cleaning. So I went up to the pencil factory. It was called the pencil
factory.
Yeah. So I went up to the pencil factory and went in and applied for a job. And it wasn't long before I got a phone call, because that was September and you were getting really busy then. And I mean busy, really busy. I knew Orabelle and the other three ladies. I knew all of them. They were from Lexington, so I'd lived there a long enough time to know them all. And I started out with Orabelle packing the pens. And then I moved down with Fern and helped on the lathes down there. And then I just moved around to all the different machines, and then I ended up printing. And I printed so many snap-on screwdrivers, I thought I was going to lose my mind. I printed on the last printing machine, back by the lacquer machine. Now, we didn't have air conditioning then, and boy, was it hot. Really hot. But I loved to print. I really did. And I printed quite a while. And then that was when we were up in Lexington. And then we moved down here. Well, we bought Stoneart first. Stoneart. Now, that's a story. That's where we got
exactly right.
Stoneart. We made marble plaques. And they sold pretty good for a while. But then we got so many that we couldn't get them all painted in time. We couldn't get all the orders completed, and we just kind of got rid of that. So, but I remember the time that the water came in, we got like 7 inches of rain in an hour, and the water came into the place where we were making these stone plaques, and we had to climb up on the tables because it was so deep. That was quite a day. We had to get the fire department out to pump the water out of the basement. It was so bad.
Okay.
But we didn't lose too much. We didn't lose but a few things. And I really enjoyed working there. And then after Stoneart, we came down here, brought Stoneart down here, and then we got rid of Stoneart and Screwdriver Line. We all came down here again and worked. And I did a lot of the jobs down here that I did up there. Well, I packed too. I did some packing. And then I went to the office and did numerous jobs up there.
Boy.
And that was my story.
I remember, just quickly, I remember we were having trouble. We were selling religious goods stores religious plaques made out of this marble, cast marble, and we were shipping them all over the country. And I had this religious goods store that wasn't paying its bills, and a lot of them were kind of born again Christians, and a lot of them were not financially stable at that time. And anyway, I called this woman up and I said, by the way, you owe me $800 for these plaques. And she said, well, that's interesting. She said, I was looking at that this morning and God told me not to pay that bill because I don't have the money. And I just paused on the phone and I said, that's interesting. I was praying this morning and God told me to call you and collect that bill. Yeah. But anyway, I mean, it was crazy. We ended up selling that company, and the person who bought it went out of business in a matter of 6 months. But
Did they?
yeah.
I didn't know
Yeah,
if they had
they
or
did.
not.
Yeah,
So anyway.
Jay and I went up there to show them how to
How to do
set,
it?
how to
Yeah,
do
in Chicago.
things. Yeah.
Lexington.
Yeah,
You had the brick building
and the brick building.
and the little
No.
building back behind it.
Yeah, the building behind. it.
Those two buildings.
Yeah.
Then when did you buy the Ford building?
We bought the Ford building probably. We had it when you were there.
Yes.
4 or 5 years later,
So like maybe 1973,
yeah.
something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, you had it when I was there.
and it was an awkward building. It was on 2 floors,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you had to drive up to get in it. And it was kind of weird, but anyway, that we bought that building.
That's where we made our pencils.
Yeah.
Our mechanical pencils with it.
Yeah.
Ford building.
Exactly. So anyway, then we were fortunate enough to get Marilyn's daughter and Shelley Bryant, and so Shelley's been with us for, as I mentioned, for 40 years. And Shelley, what do you think about these past years? And she's been, by the way, I must say, she's a treasured employee. She's my stepdaughter. And I'm very, very thankful God sent her to us. So anyway, what are you thinking?
Well, at first I was like, okay, I'm just going to work part-time. They called or they asked Mom, hey, can Shelley do some cleaning? And so Mom asked me, and I said, yeah, Mom would babysit because I had my oldest son. And so she babysat, and I came up to Lexington and did some cleaning, emptied garbage, swept the floors, cleaned the bathrooms, cleaned the office, things like that. I did that for quite a while. And every once in a while, someone wouldn't show up for work. Betty Luster, which was the production manager or supervisor on the floor, would call and say, hey, we could use your help, and could you come in for a few hours? So I would go in for a few hours, and it just kind of gradually, every once in a while, she'd say, well, so-and-so's going to be on vacation for a week. Can you come help me? And so I kind of filled in for probably a year. And then she asked me one day if I'd like a full-time job. I thought it was time to go to work full-time, I guess. And I worked with Doris Sears, which her daughter works here now, Sandy Porter, on the lacquer booth.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Now, if you were going to start out anywhere, the lacquer booth would probably not be the place you'd want to start. It was like Mom said, there was no air conditioning, and the lacquer booth was really hot. Really hot.
You would have those banana fumes from the lacquer.
Yeah. And everything that they printed, between screwdrivers, the pen barrels, all had to be lacquered because the ink they used and the machines they used was water soluble. So it would come off if you even rubbed your finger across it or anything. So everything had to go through the lacquer booth. So Doris and I worked back there for, I don't remember how many years together, quite a few. And then I moved on to printing after, actually, I don't know if you and Bob both went to a show. You went to a printing show and you bought a couple of the silk screen machines.
Silk screen.
So,
Right,
I started out working on a silk screen.
you started out on a,
but when they brought the silk.
right, but
You had the little rubber dies.
right,
Yeah.
when they printed with rubber dies and water soluble ink. And I also remember the pens, when they wanted a gold imprint,
Oh man.
they were printed with a clear lacquer and they were dipped in gold flakes and then put in water to take off the excess, and then you lacquered them. So a crown pen with gold imprint was actual
Gold.
gold.
Yep.
imprint.
We had to
So
wash that off.
Yeah, you washed it off and then you lacquered it.
The gold, bronze, and we had a silver also that was
Yeah.
the same way.
Yeah.
Silver, and I don't know what we call the silver.
I don't remember.
But anyway, it was gold, bronze, and this was a very, 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 very fine powder, almost like talcum. And anyway, we were very cautious on how we handled it because it would get into the air and get on all of our other products. And we had this one person, I'm trying to think of who it was a printer, and she had a cold, and one day she's dipping these pens in this and sneezes into this gold powder. Well, the whole plant, and we had blowers and fans because we didn't have air conditioning. So this stuff was blowing we had this damn gold stuff on all of our products.
Okay,
And,
who did that?
oh, what a mess that was. But she sneezed right into it and it just flew out, you know.
I thought Shirley Wilson did a lot
Maybe,
of the pens.
maybe it was Shirley,
I did a
but
lot of
oh my
those.
God.
Yeah.
We about hung her up to dry after that. It just was everywhere. I mean,
And then,
Great.
so with all the printing had to be lacquered, print machines that rolled across the ink and then rolled across that. So, yeah. So the lacquer booth was important, even though it was really hot. But it was an important job because that had to be done. It had to be done, and you had to set up the lacquer just right so it didn't run on the product, and you just wanted a certain spray to go on the product. And then once the 2 silk screen machines were brought in, I moved on to printing. And that was an experience because no one knew how to silk screen print. And I remember the 2 machines had to be in air conditioning.
Yeah.
So these 2 machines were put in a room with plastic stapled to wood with a window air conditioner and no venting.
Yeah.
That was interesting. The smell and back then you cleaned everything with acetone. So you had the acetone smell, the ink smell, and things like that.
so we had people on drugs without even knowing it.
Yeah,
They were all high.
Yeah. So should you say that?
Yeah, come to work for us.
And what I do remember when I first started, it was very family orientated. There was a lot of mothers and daughters, daughter-in-laws that worked there. It was a lot of family.
It really was.
It was even, I think, a couple of the one tool and die gentleman, Russ Coleman.
Yeah.
I think a couple of his granddaughters worked there at one time.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it was very
Peggy
family
Powell
oriented.
was one.
Yeah, Peggy Powell. So it was very family orientated, and I mean, it's like if you had a sister or a cousin or
Bring them on.
yeah, and they graduated from high school. They came and worked. Not everybody stayed. It wasn't something everybody had a niche for. So, but on my journey, I learned silk screen printing for screwdrivers, and then we did pens, and we did a pen that you printed a small logo at the top, the high-tech pen,
Right.
and it was 2 different colors. We figured out how to put a piece of plastic on a screen, and we had red here and white here, and cut our squeegee and printed those 2 colors at the same time. So we did 2 color without actually having a 2 color machine.
Right.
So we figured that out, how to do that. Me and a couple other gals. That was one of our interesting adventures that we we took different things to cut. I think we ended up with we tried plastic, then we went to and we ended up with window sealing, the foam that you peel and you just stuck it on there and you could print. As I said, family orientated. At one point, when I got married to Jay came to work for Alexander. He worked in the inventory at one point, and then it was Mom and I and Jay, and then Jay's mom worked there for a few months, washing barrels and pen handles. So at one time there was 4 of us working there together. Then, like Mom said, they bought this building here.
Mm-hmm.
We had
$1.8 million.
$1.8 million.
Can't be late.
That's right.
That was
We
our
had
slogan.
a big
Camel cigarettes.
Camel and Winston.
Yeah.
Had the Camel on, I think, 800,000, and the Winston Eagle was on a million of the screwdrivers. So that was the
Biggest order we've ever had.
big adventure on that and getting it all done. That was very interesting because we only had 4 silk screen machines at the time.
Right?
So yeah, and
You couldn't walk in that place because they had stacks of screwdrivers like this everywhere.
they had
Did
automated.
we have machines?
They had some automated
I can't remember.
blading machines at that time, but we didn't really have. We had an automated screwdriver machine, a couple of them, but to put the magnets in, you sat on
Yep.
a ladder and you filled the tube with the magnets, and you still had 2 other people at the machine.
We didn't have automatic feeders.
No, we
No.
didn't have automatic feeders. Somebody would feed the handle, and somebody would put the clip on, and someone would sit up there and keep the magnet tube fed. So that was interesting
That
to
was
get $1.8 million
interesting.
screwdrivers done. People were putting magnets in by hand. We had 2 machines set up for it. So I learned silk screen printing, lacquer booth, silk screen printing, not offset. Well, it's kind of like offset printing, the Cyrel printing at that time. We did the Husky can opener. We learned how
Come
to
on,
do those
yes.
by hand. Those were done by hand.
Right.
We had a hand machine and then printed those, and then they cut the tip and slid the metal in. And didn't they punch press those at the other building?
No.
Did you have those made?
We had those made.
Did you have those made?
We had the dies, but we didn't have a heavy enough press.
Heavy enough
to
press.
make them.
Okay, so I learned how to do silk screen. And then, like Mom said, they had bought this building, and once you sold Stone Art, they moved the screwdriver part, all the screwdriver printing machines and all of the assembly machines here. Now, when they moved down here, they did not have that part of the building. It was all this building right here, and part of it was used for inventory because I don't know if when they moved in, they didn't have that. You didn't
I
build
don't
that
think
shed
that was a
yet.
warehouse.
Didn't have that as a warehouse yet. So everything was in the building. But we still had the Lexington building, and we were doing pens up there. So they had separated the business. Pens were in Lexington and screwdrivers were here. I stayed in Lexington, and there was 2 of us that stayed in Lexington and printed the pens and helped assemble pens. And when some of the pens we were still doing, I think you had the mechs already made, but then some of the mechs you went to the other building and you had to work on the mech line.
Let me just say that the Cobra pen, this pen, we made by hand, one at a time.
Yeah.
And these barrels here and the cap we bought, we had a mold, but the mold didn't have a gate that was a what they call a secret gate. It had a big donut on the end. We would have to take these caps and drill them and take that donut off. There were 26 parts in this pen. Now there are 7. But there were 26 parts in this pen with the metal twist action. There were cams and there were bushings and there were drive tubes.
It was all made out of brass.
Oh, and we turned around. We would take this barrel here. It's got some lines at the front and threads here, and we would take this barrel and cut it from a piece of 4-foot tubing. And so we would cut these pieces like this. Then we would heat water not to boiling, but very hot. And then we put this in the hot water and push it down into a form and swedge this and form this taper on the front. Well, then we take it out of the water, and then we would take, and there's lines on here, we would put it into a lathe, turn the lathe on, and pull down a little blade, and it would roll the lines into the finger grip in the front. Then we would take and let it cool, and then we would put a threading machine. We had it on another lathe, and we would put it in there, and it would go in and thread inside threading on this piece. Well, that was the last step after taking this and cutting it and then swedging it and then putting the lines on it and then putting the thread in it. And often the part would break because it was so thin on the front, and we'd have to throw it away and start all over again. So I'm just saying that you have no idea. You had no idea what this was, and then
your production time?
but I mean, it was just
Not very good.
it was terrible, and we just thought it was fantastic. And if you take a look at the pencils in this catalog, and it'll show you how they were, all the different parts that are inside, and it'll show you here all the different parts that are inside. But the pencil has many more parts than is showing on here. And we had drive tubes, we had punching, we had clutches, we had, oh my God, all the parts that went into making the mechanisms. I bought a company called Eastern Products up in Rhode Island, and they had all the machinery to make pencil mechanisms.
Yep.
And we brought them all down here. My friend Dick Muckler had a truck up in Rhode Island, and he brought the truck over and loaded all the equipment on and brought it down here for us. And anyway, but when you think of what these people went through in the beginning, I mean, how
The mech line, that was
the mech line,
That was
I mean, how it was possible
the same as
to do this. I mean, it blows my mind today. We had spring winders, we had punching equipment, we had deburring equipment, we had all this stuff. I mean, I can't even imagine.
Well, I think that Shelley said that whoever skipped work or came
Yep.
late had to go to the back line.
Yeah.
If you-
Nobody wanted to
if
skip
you
work
missed-
because we didn't want
We
to
knew
go to the back line.
if you missed work, you knew the next day where you didn't even have to ask. You knew
You
you
were on the
might
Mech
just
line.
start walking down the street to the Ford building and you were on the Mech
And
line.
you
Yeah.
better work the speed that they
Get in trouble, but Fern
Hurry up.
worker,
Fern was our Helga.
Yeah.
She was a tough boy.
she taught you a work ethic
Yes, she
that
did.
did not
Right.
stop, and you know, a lot of people can only put things together one-handed.
Yeah.
You're right-handed, you usually are going to use your right hand. When you worked on the Mech line, you learned how to use both hands. That was, I mean,
you
that
just
was
can't imagine what it was.
it was difficult, and you didn't talk. You did not talk at all. You had to work, but I mean, there was orders that had to be fulfilled, and
Yeah.
that was part of
It
the
had to
job.
be done.
And so, in the incoming future, there was things that happened.
Well, we redesigned all the
Redesigned it.
parts.
Yeah.
And the Cobra, we had a very good friend of ours in up in New Jersey area. His name was Warren Shea, and Warren had a company by the name of Rotary, and was a dear friend of my father's in the Lipic Pen Company. And Warren came down and he said, "You guys have got to upgrade this." He said, "You just are gonna sink." He said, "This will never work." And so anyway, he said, "Give me all the parts to this pen." And he said, he made plastic parts, and he said, "I will redesign it." And he redesigned it to what it is today, and went from 20 some parts, 25 some parts, down to 7.
Yeah.
And he saved us. And we bought these parts from him, and oh my God, it was just unbelievable. I mean, we were in heaven.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
but pencils, we never did
We
get
never
out
did
of that
really
until we
get-
stopped making
Yeah.
pencils.
Yeah.
We were stuck with that the whole time.
Yeah. The pencils just were not.
I mean, beautiful products.
They
I mean,
were.
we had very high quality, very good products. I mean, it was like a jeweler's watch.
They were.
And
They were more the higher quality, and
right.
when we got a pencil order, it was usually a pen and pencil set that had someone's name on it for a graduation or something.
Yeah,
And
really
a lot of
those.
the people in Lexington would order the pen and pencil sets.
Right.
You would let them come in and just order 1 or 2 sets, because at the time we had a hand engraver.
Yeah,
You think that's
hand
bad?
engraver.
You think lifting up this, there used to be just, you put the barrel in and you couldn't, you couldn't press down, and
You can ruin a lot
you
of
could,
barrels.
yeah. So
Now we
You
just
had-
put it in a machine and press
Yeah,
a
press
button and
the
it
button.
burns it in.
Right.